Seattle's rain fell with a kind of rhythm that felt scripted that morning. Outside my condo window, the clouds rolled low like they had secrets to keep. I had just poured my first coffee when I noticed the silence in the apartment. It was not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that hums in your bones. The kind that tells you something is terribly wrong. I called out once. "Dylan!" No answer. The bed was made, and his closet door was cracked open. Too open. I stepped toward the fridge, where something white caught my eye. A torn piece of paper, stuck with a magnet shaped like a golden seahorse. The note read, "Goodbye. I never loved you. Take care." Just like that. 4 sentences to burn down a life we had supposedly built over 7 years. My name is Marissa Langley. I am a 38-year-old forensic accountant who has spent the last decade and a half tracing money through hidden accounts, shell companies, and offshore escapes. But I never thought I would be applying those same skills to my own husband. You see, Dylan Mercer did not vanish. He executed a plan. But what he failed to realize was that I had already seen it coming, and this time, the con artist had chosen the wrong woman to deceive. 3 months earlier, I noticed a shift. He suddenly cared about our retirement portfolios after years of ignoring them. He asked about account passwords with a casualness that made my skin prickle. And the lies started dripping in. Business trips that made no sense, late-night phone calls that ended when I walked into the room, vague talk about a new opportunity he was too excited to reveal. He thought he was careful. He used burner emails, switched SIM cards, hid charges under fake labels. But I knew where to look, because I had trained my entire career to follow the trail of those who hide behind numbers. While Dylan kissed me goodnight each evening, I was logging into our bank's back-end system. While he claimed to be meeting investors, I was meeting my attorney. Every screenshot, every receipt, every suspicious login. It was all neatly cataloged in a file folder on my desktop labeled Seattle Art Project, a name he would never question because he hated modern art. By the time he left that cold little note on the fridge, the accounts were frozen. The trust funds were redirected. Our joint investment property had already been flagged for lien prevention, and his attempts to quietly liquidate my IRA were intercepted by a fraud alert. He thought he was escaping. What he was really doing was tripping into a legal snare, so tight he would not wiggle out again. The real twist came 20 minutes later when my phone buzzed. It was Dylan's sister, Tasha. She was frantic. "Where is he?" she demanded. "He promised me the rent money by today. You're telling me he vanished?" I swallowed the fire rising in my throat and answered coolly, "What do you mean the rent money? He said he was sending it to you." "Yes. Last week. He said it was a done deal." "Right," I said, allowing the silence to stretch long enough to sell the lie. "That is surprising." Tasha kept talking, assuming she was informing me of Dylan's betrayal for the first time. But I already knew she was not his sister. Not legally. Not biologically. In fact, I had evidence she was something far more dangerous, a repeat accomplice with a past connected to 2 financial fraud cases in Arizona and Nevada. This was no ordinary marital betrayal. Dylan Mercer, or whatever name he used before, was not just a husband who walked out. He was a professional con artist, and I had just discovered the tip of something far bigger. But I needed more. I sat down at my computer and opened the encrypted folder Felicia, my colleague at the firm, had helped me piece together. Inside were digital threads we had not yet pulled. Offshore wire logs, partial names, a connection to a real estate firm in Vancouver, and one chilling note from a flagged file titled Exit Strategy Plan C. Dylan was not done. He was building something, or someone new, and I had a sinking feeling I was not his first victim. The day darkened outside. The rain picked up. I stared at my own reflection in the laptop screen and whispered to myself, "You do not get to just walk away." Because this was not just about me anymore. It never was. And the game, it had only just begun. The following morning, I arrived early at the office. The air was still thick with mist, and the lights on the 42nd floor of Langley Grant and Associates hadn't yet flickered to life. I preferred it that way. Darkness gave me space to think, to listen. As a forensic accountant, silence was where numbers told the loudest stories. I booted up my workstation, bypassed the firm's internal network, and entered my private terminal, the one I used when a case felt less like a job and more like survival. The folder titled Project Redwood opened with a soft ping. Inside were spreadsheets, image captures, and transaction trails from every account Dylan and I had shared. But that wasn't all. Another subfolder, newly updated overnight, had a red notification badge. That folder wasn't mine. Felicia! She had access. She was the only one I trusted enough to give it. And what she just uploaded changed everything. A voice echoed behind me before I could click it. "You're going to want to see this in person," she said softly, her breath fogging the glass wall of my office. Felicia Grant was not just my colleague. She was my compass, my late-night sanity check, and now, my partner in exposing a man whose web stretched further than I had imagined. In the conference room, the lights dimmed low. She pulled up 2 side-by-side screens. One was our joint personal account from last year. The other was from an ongoing case we've been analyzing for a government audit, fraudulent activity tied to a firm called Meridian Apex Trust. My mouth went dry. There, in black and white, was the same transaction pattern. Same shell corporations. Same dollar amounts, fragmented across multiple accounts under pseudonyms. And at the center of both was a familiar name, D. Mercer, masked under alternate aliases but traced through matching IP metadata and digital device IDs. "You said Dylan disappeared 2 days ago," Felicia said, eyes narrowed. "Marissa, I think he didn't just run from you. I think he ran because the walls were closing in from the other side, too." I stared at the screen. "You think he's involved in Meridian Apex?" "No," she said grimly. "I think he built it." The implications twisted my stomach. Meridian Apex was under review for wire fraud involving tech investors from Portland, Vancouver, and even some clients in New York. We thought it was a 2-man scheme led by brokers in Toronto. But Dylan was the missing link, the ghost behind the curtain. "Look at this," she continued, flipping to another screen. A woman's face appeared on the monitor. She had dark curls, piercing eyes, and a jaw set like stone. Naomi Rivers filed a police report in 2020 after her husband, real name Peter Laskin, vanished with nearly $800,000. "You might know him as Dylan Mercer." My heart kicked hard. "He married her in British Columbia," Felicia went on, "used fake credentials, played the role of supportive partner for 2 years, and then vanished after transferring everything to offshore firms. Names match. Paper trails match. And guess what? I barely breathed. She's been trying to track him ever since." I swallowed. "We need to find her." "I already did," she said. "She's in Seattle. She's been here for weeks." The room fell silent. Outside, the fog had thickened over Puget Sound, the ferries below barely visible. The city felt distant, disconnected, like we were operating on a frequency few others could hear. "How did she know he was here?" I asked. Felicia lifted a paper. "Same way you did. The mistakes he made with you? He made them with her too. Patterns, habits, ego. Only this time he wanted more. He wanted a professional reputation he could hijack. Yours." My vision sharpened like glass under pressure. I stood slowly, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "You said she's here? Works out of a co-working space in Capitol Hill. Quiet. Keeps to herself. But I think she's finally ready to talk." I nodded. "Set it up." As Felicia made the call, I stared at the screen. A photo of Dylan, or Peter, or whatever his real name was, stared back. Handsome, polished, eyes filled with that practiced warmth that once drew me in. I looked deeper now and saw it for what it really was, calculation, not care. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a quiet cafe, rain streaming down the windows, when Naomi Rivers walked in. She was taller than I expected. Her eyes met mine with the exact recognition I felt in my gut. Sisters by betrayal. Partners by necessity. "You're Marissa," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I've been waiting for this moment." I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table between us. "Then let's bring him down. Together." That night I could not sleep. Even with every lock secured and every window shut against the wind, my thoughts refused to quiet. Naomi's voice echoed in my head, steady but bruised with memory. She had trusted him with everything. Her accounts, her ambitions, her life. Just like I had, he had vanished from her world with a trail of broken trust and stolen assets. And now he was trying to do the same to me, except this time, he was bolder. Sloppier. hungrier. But I was no longer one of his targets. I was the one drawing the blueprint. At 2 a.m, I sat in front of my laptop in a dim corner of my living room, rain tapping against the glass like a metronome of my rage. I opened the remote security feed of my condo, 6 hidden cameras installed after the first financial anomaly Dylan triggered. Just as I was reviewing motion data, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "You think you're clever? Check your email." My pulse spiked, but my hands remained calm. The email arrived seconds later. The subject line read, "Home Sweet Home." Attached were 8 photographs. One of me watering the succulents on my windowsill. One of me leaving the office. Another of me brushing my son's old jacket in the hallway closet. And worse, images clearly taken through the apartment windows at night. I had not felt fear in a long time. But this was different. This was intrusion wrapped in malice. A threat sent not just to scare me, but to tell me that I was being watched, studied, hunted. I forwarded everything to Agent Holt, the lead on Dylan's financial crimes case. Her reply came within minutes. "You were right. This is bigger than just Dylan. The sender's IP address matches James Foster, known alias Sawyer Knox, former cellmate of Dylan's in Phoenix. He's been acting as muscle for hire, probably working cleanup. Cleanup. It was a chilling word. I had read about men like James Foster in old case files. Enforcers. Shadows who slipped in when the paper trail grew too loud. Dylan was not just running a scam, he was running scared. And he had sent Foster to silence the noise. But I was not afraid. Not anymore. I shut the laptop and walked to my bedroom, pulled the drawer open, and reached for the compact remote. With one tap, the entire apartment was placed under live surveillance relay to the Bureau's local servers. Every camera, every microphone, every motion sensor. Let them come. I was done waiting. The next morning, Naomi and I met again, this time at her co-working space. A modern loft in Capitol Hill, exposed brick, muted tones, and quiet hums of creative chaos. We sat in a secluded booth, away from curious ears. "I got the same photos a year ago," she said, sliding her phone across the table. "Only they were taken in my Vancouver apartment. Bedroom window. Stairwell. Even inside my parked car. Why didn't you report it?" She looked down. "Because the person who sent them also sent a voice message. He said if I went to the police, they'd find my brother. In pieces." I understood in that moment why Naomi had stayed quiet, why she had tracked him in silence alone. She had not been afraid for herself. She had been protecting someone she loved. I exhaled slowly. That ends now. As I drove home, the rain had cleared, but the sky remained heavy, like it was holding something back. I approached my building's entrance, greeted the doorman, and made my way up the elevator. Everything felt off, like someone had adjusted the angle of the furniture while I was gone. My door was unlocked. The lock was not broken, just clicked shut, not fully turned. I pulled out my phone, activated the FBI relay stream, and watched in real time as the hidden camera in my hallway displayed 2 figures moving inside. One was Tasha, the other was Foster. So they were not subtle anymore. That meant they were getting desperate. Tasha made her way to my desk, laptop open, trying to access bank credentials. Foster stood near the window, looking down at the street like a lookout. But they had no idea that every keystroke, every breath, every whisper was being monitored. I called Naomi. Her voice was tight. "We have a problem," she said. "Tasha just texted me. From your number." A chill passed through me. "They cloned my phone." "Already called Holt," she said. "They're moving in." I stayed on the line as Naomi relayed the FBI's movement, agents converging from nearby safe houses. Then, in the feed, I saw Tasha freeze. Foster turned toward the screen, noticing the red light blinking on the desk camera. Too late. The front door burst open. In seconds, agents swarmed the apartment, weapons drawn, orders shouted. Tasha screamed. Foster tried to run, but neither made it 5 feet. I watched it all unfold from my car, parked safely across the street, engine off, heart calm. Agent Holt called seconds later. "They're in custody. Attempted data theft, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to obstruct an ongoing federal investigation." And get this, Foster had a burner phone with voice memos addressed to Dylan. I finally allowed myself a small smile. He had sent his shadows into the light. Now they were going to lead us right back to him. 3 days passed. Seattle's sky was a wash of pale gray, and I was no longer waiting, I was planning. The FBI was now in full coordination with the Department of Financial Security, compiling everything from offshore transactions to cross-border fraud reports. Felicia and I were operating as internal consultants, and Naomi had been cleared as an official witness. But despite everything, Dylan was still silent. Until he was not. The message came just after midnight. I was on my balcony, watching the boats crawl across Elliott Bay, when my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Marissa, I am sorry. Can we talk, just one last time? The timing was no accident. Naomi had warned me. He always reached out at this stage, when he sensed the walls closing in, when his proxies had failed, and he needed one last desperate connection to crack open the door again. The FBI confirmed it was his burner number, routed through a VPN server in Utah. We have to let him think he still has a chance, Agent Holt advised, eyes sharp during our emergency meeting. If he wants one last conversation, give it to him. On our terms. I chose the location. A small cafe near Pioneer Square, known for its concrete walls and poor cell reception. It had 2 exits, a long glass storefront, and a back alley monitored by bureau agents in unmarked vans. My appearance would be controlled, my bag empty, no electronics aside from a dummy phone. But the folder I would carry, that would be very real. Inside it, transaction printouts, email headers, false identities, photos, names of victims, and enough links to establish a cross-border Ponzi operation. Dylan was already waiting when I arrived. He looked nothing like the polished man I had once married. His hair was overgrown, his suit wrinkled, his face lined with exhaustion. But his performance was still immaculate. Regretful eyes, nervous hands, voice cracking just enough to sell the illusion of remorse. Marissa, he said, standing too quickly. Thank you for coming. I said nothing as I sat down. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was terrible, he began. I made some bad investments. Got in deep with the wrong people. I panicked. Cut it, I said, my voice low. Tell me what you really want. He blinked, startled by the steel in my tone. I need your help, he said carefully. There is an emergency fund. I know we set it aside for disasters, and I need access. Just to stabilize things. It will protect us both. I tilted my head. The emergency fund? You mean the one you tried to empty 2 nights ago from an IP address in Phoenix? He faltered. Just a flicker. But enough. That was a mistake. I did not know it was still active. I was just checking. I opened the folder slowly, placing it between us. How about we check this instead? His eyes scanned the documents. One page showed wire transfers from Naomi's joint account in British Columbia. Another traced a pattern identical to the fraudulent activity linked to Meridian Apex Trust. The last one, a transcript of the voice memo Foster had recorded, addressed to him by name. His lips parted, but no words came. You know what your mistake was, I said softly. You thought you could outmaneuver me, but you picked the one person trained to see through everything you are. That was when 2 agents approached the table. Confirm. Dylan Mercer, also known as Peter Laskin, also known as Marcus Dell, you are under arrest for interstate fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. He stood too fast, knocking the chair over. Wait! But it was over. They had him. As they read him his rights, his eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw what had been hidden beneath every lie he ever told, fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. I followed them to the sidewalk, watching as they loaded him into the black bureau vehicle. The rain had returned, soft and cold. Agent Holt walked up beside me. You broke him, she said. No, I replied. He broke himself. I just handed him the mirror. The trap was never the cafe. It was never the folder. The trap was believing I could still be manipulated. That was the last con Dylan Mercer would ever attempt, and the only one that failed. By the time Dylan was booked, fingerprinted, and placed into a federal holding cell, the rest of the operation kicked into overdrive. The charges alone would keep him locked away for decades, but we wanted more than prison time. We wanted to dismantle everything he had built. I spent the next 48 hours at the Bureau's Seattle field office, poring over encrypted financial ledgers, false business registrations, and fake advisory firms Dylan had created. Every single shell company had a common thread, a signature traced back to one person, not him, but someone else. A name I had seen once before, Evelyn Zhang. On paper, she was a hedge fund manager in San Diego, operating within completely legal bounds. But as we traced the digital footprint deeper, things stopped adding up. Her filings were too clean, too polished. She had no paper mistakes, no metadata slip-ups, no duplicates. It was as if someone had scrubbed her history daily. And then Felicia found it. Evelyn Zhang had visited Seattle 4 times in the past year. Each visit coincided with one of Dylan's networking weekends. The same weekends, he claimed to be meeting angel investors in Bellevue. Worse, the hotel charges he used matched room numbers paid for under her name. "Tell me, she is not just another target," I muttered, scanning her most recent public photos. But my gut said otherwise. Felicia shook her head. "I do not think she is a victim." "She is not," Agent Holt confirmed when we brought the theory to her. "Zhang has been on our radar for 6 months. We suspected she was laundering money through a tech investment ring, but we could never tie her to anything solid. Until now." Inside Dylan's laptop, retrieved at the time of arrest, was a private encrypted folder titled Empire. The key: Naomi's birthday. The irony made my skin crawl. When we cracked it, it all spilled out. Voice memos, recorded phone calls, fake passports, and detailed planning notes for a new firm they were building together, Opal Ridge Holdings. Its purpose? To lure high-net-worth clients into a fake portfolio system using my credentials and Zhang's reputation. A dual con, trust from my side, credibility from hers. The operation was far more ambitious than anything Dylan had attempted before. It was structured like a hedge fund, registered in Belize, and seeded with stolen funds from victims across 5 states. But the most damning file was an audio recording labeled simply meeting_Zhang_clubhouse.wave. We listened in stunned silence. Zhang's voice was clear. Calm. Cold. "You use the wife to get the banking access," she said. "Use the charm to keep her quiet. When it is time to move, we replace her with an assistant or fake a breakdown. They never see it coming." Dylan chuckled on the other end. "You make it sound so easy." "Because it is," Zhang replied. "Naomi was with us when we heard it. Her hands trembled, but she kept listening. She needed to. We all did." "They never saw it coming," Naomi whispered. "Not until now." Agent Holt leaned forward. "We can use this, not just to charge Dylan, but to bring Zhang down. If she gets even a whisper that we have this, she will run," I said. "She will disappear. But if we move now," Felicia added, "we might have a shot." Naomi exhaled. "I know where she will go." We all turned. "She has a safe house. Vancouver Island." Dylan mentioned it once, back when we lived in British Columbia. Said it was their clean slate spot. If things got messy. Within hours, a cross-border task force was launched. Zhang was placed on a temporary no-fly list. Her financial accounts were frozen. And quietly, the Canadian authorities moved to monitor every known location linked to her aliases. Still, something about all of it gnawed at me. She knew. I said aloud in Holt's office. She knew I was a forensic accountant. Why would she go along with a plan that used my name? It is reckless. Amateur. Holt nodded slowly. Because she did not think you would fight back. You were not just another mark. You were supposed to be the final step. The mask. The credibility she needed to vanish in plain sight. Then let's make sure she never gets that chance, I replied. The net was tightening. Dylan was cornered. Foster and Tasha were talking. And now Evelyn Zhang, the most dangerous player of all, was in our sights. But she would not go down easy. And something told me she was already watching. 3 nights after the warrant was issued for Evelyn Zhang, she vanished. The surveillance team on Vancouver Island found the safe house abandoned, freshly scrubbed, no electronics, no documents, not even a fingerprint. Her last known banking activity was a failed login attempt in Singapore using outdated credentials. That was Zhang's signature, one final ghostly echo to keep everyone chasing shadows while she slipped through a different door. The only thing she left behind was a note, typed and taped to the fridge. You're not the only one who can draw blueprints, Marissa. She had made it personal. Felicia and I stared at the photo of the note in Agent Holt's office. There was no mistaking the message. Zhang was targeting me now. I had disrupted her plan, exposed her partner, and destroyed the con she had carefully nurtured. But more than that, I had humiliated her. I know this pattern, I muttered, pacing the room. She leaves a cold trail on purpose. She wants to reset the game on her terms. Naomi leaned against the window, arms crossed. She won't let it go. She will circle back. Felicia pulled up the latest data set from Dylan's seized files. Then we circle faster. The documents Dylan had hoarded on his laptop were more extensive than we imagined. He had kept copies of everything Evelyn ever sent him. Strategy maps, voice memos, alias databases, even scripts she used to seduce new clients. But most important was a spreadsheet coded in colored cells and locked behind an extra layer of encryption titled Foundation. It listed cities, dates, transfer amounts, and initials. And one of those cities was Seattle. Scheduled just a week from now. She is not running, I said aloud. She is rebooting. Agent Holt zoomed in on the most recent transaction attempt. A high-value client from Boston had been contacted by someone using my name and Zhang's new alias, Jade Ainsley. The meeting had been scheduled through a luxury concierge service linked to a boutique firm she had just registered in Dubai. We traced the registration back to a shell company in Morocco. She's layering, Felicia whispered. She's building a new identity while trying to harvest whatever cash she can before disappearing completely. Then we hit her where it hurts, Naomi added. Reputation. The next move required something more dangerous than any legal form or federal raid. It required bait. We created a false high-net-worth profile, embedded it within a private network known for discreet wealth managers. We gave the identity a name, Dr. Elise Rowan, a tech philanthropist looking to invest $2 million in a sustainable AI fund, Zhang's favorite bait. Then we waited. It took 4 hours. A reply came from a woman named Jade Ainsley. Her message was warm, articulate, and riddled with Zhang's linguistic fingerprints, casual British inflections, flattering phrasing, carefully constructed trust cues. She wanted to meet in person. Seattle. The following evening. She thought she was still in control. But this time, we controlled the room, the building, the perimeter, and the script. I arrived at the rooftop venue first, an empty event space staged as an investment presentation. One wall was glass, the city's skyline glowing behind it. The other was a polish bar where bureau agents posed as waitstaff. And at exactly 8 o'clock, Evelyn Zhang walked in. She wore a tailored coat in dark olive, her hair swept up, her eyes shielded by gold-framed glasses. She looked every bit the high-end investor she pretended to be, and she scanned the room with the kind of precision only predators possess. I approached slowly, playing my part. Miss Ainsley, I asked, offering a practiced smile. She nodded. Dr. Rowan, it's lovely to finally meet you. She extended her hand. I took it, and then I locked my eyes on hers and whispered, You should have stayed gone. Her hand froze. Her smile flickered. That was the signal. The room shifted. Agents stepped out from behind curtains. Doors sealed. Voices shouted. Evelyn turned, fast, graceful, but there was nowhere to run. It was over in seconds. They cuffed her with quiet efficiency, reading her rights as her mask finally cracked. Her eyes locked onto mine one last time, not with fear but fury. I made you, she hissed. You wouldn't exist without me. No, I said softly. You made a blueprint for control. I built one for justice. As they led her away, the lights from the skyline reflected in the glass wall like 1,000 tiny watchful eyes. She had played the game like a ghost. Elegant, precise, elusive. But this time, the ghost had been caught. By the very woman she tried to erase. It took less than a week for the news to break. By the time Zhang's arrest reached the press, the headlines were everywhere. International finance ring busted in Seattle sting. Luxury investment fraud. Hedge fund powerhouse exposed. The women who took them down. And just like that, the world began to catch up to the truth we had lived with for years. But beneath the viral headlines and morning talk shows, something deeper was happening. Something quieter, far more important. Women began writing to me. Not press, not journalists, Not law enforcement. Victims. From Toronto. From Palm Springs. From Singapore. One by one, the messages arrived. The stories were different in setting, in detail, and currency, but the patterns were identical. The same charm, the same tactics, the same vanishing acts. And in more than half of them, a common name resurfaced. Zhang. In some cases, she posed as a business consultant. In others, she used Dylan, or men like him, to carry out the personal scams while she handled the corporate shells. But the result was always the same. Financial ruin, emotional devastation, shame, so deep that some had never spoken about it to anyone before now. Until they heard about us. Naomi, Felicia, and I called it the network. Not the one Zhang tried to build ours. A private circle where survivors came together, pooled knowledge, shared documents, and began to reclaim what had been stolen from them, not just money, but their voices. Naomi emerged as its quiet leader. She had lived in the shadows long enough. Now, she moved with strength. Her past no longer weighed her down, it armored her. Felicia led the data team, building a digital forensic map of every alias, every shell company, every fake passport tied to Evelyn and Dylan's empire. The web was even larger than we'd feared. Operations touched 3 continents, with losses totaling over $74 million. As for me, I found myself at the center of something I never meant to create. The Bureau offered me a permanent role as a special financial consultant, and for the first time in years, I said yes without hesitation. I had spent a lifetime tracing money, following shadows, teaching corporations how to plug leaks. But now, I had a different mission. I was tracing people, the ones who slipped through the cracks because no one believed them. Because they were women who dared to trust. One afternoon, I sat alone in a government office reviewing a cold case from 2015, a quiet case involving a woman in Quebec who had reported her savings stolen by a man posing as a financial planner. The file had been shelved. The investigation dropped. No one followed through. Until now, the signature on the fake investment contract. Marcus Dell, Dylan's 6th alias. I scanned through the notes in silence, my jaw tightening with each page. The woman had died 2 years after the scam. Suicide. No closure. No restitution. She deserved better, I said aloud. Felicia entered, holding a flash drive. That's why we're here. The drive held the latest decryptions from Zhang's encrypted vault. It was worse than we thought. A fully automated laundering system built on synthetic identities and manipulated crypto wallets. Her operation had evolved faster than most federal systems could track. But not faster than us. The Bureau authorized the use of the network as a test case, the first collaborative civilian task force operating under official oversight, led by survivors, powered by evidence, and focused on stopping digital finance crimes before they metastasized. We called it the Mirror Protocol, named after what we had become to people like Dylan and Zhang. They looked at us and saw targets. But now they would see reflections of every lie they ever told, every life they ever broke. One afternoon, I returned to my condo after a long day of testimony prep for Zhang's upcoming trial. The rain was soft, the kind that fogged windows and quieted streets. I poured a coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. There was a new message. From someone I did not recognize. Subject asterisk, I think I knew him. Body asterisk, he went by Lucas Nye. I was engaged to him in 2018. He disappeared after taking access to my equity line of credit. I never reported it. I thought I was just stupid. But then I saw your name. I saw your story. And now I think maybe I'm not alone. See? I stared at the screen, then hit reply. You are absolutely not alone. The network had grown. The mission had evolved. The trap that Dylan and Zhang once used to steal had now become our greatest weapon. Not fear, but connection. And that was just the beginning. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and nerves. I had been in courtrooms before, as an expert witness, as a financial analyst, as the quiet professional brought in to explain numbers no one else could untangle. But this time, I was not here to speak for a client. I was here to face the man who had tried to erase me. The trial of Dylan Mercer, also known as Peter Laskin, Marcus Dell, and Lucas Nye, began on a rainy Monday morning in King County Superior Court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the press box. Members of the network sat in the back rows, shoulder to shoulder, silent, watchful, unshakable. He entered in shackles. Gone was the expensive suit, the confident gait, the fake charm. He looked like what he had always been beneath the performance, a man who had run out of lies. His eyes flicked up as I took my seat at the front, flanked by Agent Holt and Felicia. For a moment, his expression shifted. I could not tell if it was recognition or regret. Not that it mattered. The prosecution opened with calm precision. They painted Dylan not just as a fraudster, but as an architect of manipulation. A man who had perfected the art of trust, used marriage as camouflage, and weaponized affection to drain accounts across borders. But the real impact came when Naomi stepped up to testify. She stood tall in a navy blue blazer, her voice steady. She spoke of Vancouver mornings filled with whispered promises, of wire transfers disguised as business expenses, of the day she opened their joint account only to find it empty. Her hands trembled once, just once, when she described receiving the photos through her window. I stayed quiet because I was scared, she said. But I am not scared anymore. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with a folder of printouts and timelines, receipts and screenshots. But I did not need them. I had lived every page of this case. I spoke about the note on the fridge, the fake investment firm, the surveillance footage, the coordinated accounts. I spoke about Zhang, about Foster, about the way the con had evolved into something systemic and corporate. But I ended with something different. I have spent 15 years of my life tracking financial crimes, I said. I have seen numbers used to hide theft, shame used to silence victims, and systems fail the people they were meant to protect. But this time, we did not stay silent. This time, we tracked back. When I stepped down, the courtroom was quiet. Not a tense quiet, a resolute one. The defense tried everything. Claimed trauma, claimed confusion, tried to paint Dylan as a man who got in over his head and panicked. But no jury in the world could unsee what they had been shown. And Evelyn Zhang, she was there too, in a separate courtroom, preparing for her own trial in federal court. She had tried to make a deal, but the Bureau rejected it. She was no longer seen as an accomplice. She was seen as a leader. On the fourth day, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, interstate financial manipulation, witness intimidation, digital surveillance. The sentence was read by a judge with a voice like stone. Dylan Mercer, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. He did not speak. Not when the cuffs were locked tighter. Not when the bailiff led him away. Not when he passed me. Not more than 2 feet from where I sat. But I watched him, and for a brief moment I saw what I never thought I would. Not fear, not anger, but clarity. He finally understood that it was over. As the courtroom emptied, Felicia placed a hand on my shoulder. We did it, she said. No, I whispered. We started it. Because Zhang's trial was next. Because there were still victims to find. Because the game had changed, not in their favor, but in ours. Outside the courthouse, the sky was still gray. Naomi stood with a cluster of women from the network, hugging someone new. Another woman had just arrived, another story waiting to be heard, another name added to the circle. I walked over and joined them, not as a witness, not as an expert, but as one of them, one of the women who refused to disappear. 6 months after the trial, the world had moved on. News cycles shifted to newer scandals, newer crimes, newer headlines. But for those of us whose lives had been built and broken in the quiet corners of financial betrayal, the work had only deepened. Zhang's trial had concluded in early April. The evidence was overwhelming. Her voice recordings, her ledger, her emails, cloud-stored contracts, and offshore trails. Unlike Dylan, she did not go quietly. She fought, denied, redirected. But in the end, the blueprint she had constructed was too precise, and that precision became her undoing. The verdict was unanimous. 28 years in federal prison. She never looked at me during sentencing. Never once. And I realized something in that courtroom, something I had not admitted even to myself. Zhang was never afraid of prison. She was afraid of being ordinary, forgotten, powerless, and that was exactly what she had become. But her downfall revealed something else, something darker. Among the confiscated evidence, there was a final file the Bureau decrypted in April. A ledger, not financial, not in the traditional sense. It was a target ledger, coded entries, initials, cities, vulnerabilities. Over 60 names, all women, all with assets or reputations or connections Zhang believed she could manipulate. Some had been contacted, some had vanished from the grid, some, we discovered with quiet horror, had died bankrupt, alone, unaware that they had even been victims of a calculated scheme. It was not just theft, it was warfare. Agent Holt called us in for a closed-door briefing. Inside the Bureau's Cyber Operations Center, they projected the final ledger onto a massive screen. Names scrolled like a slow dirge, each one carrying a story, a history, a tragedy. We will never know how many were affected, Holt said quietly. But thanks to the work you three did, and the network you built, we have a chance to stop the next Zhang before she even picks up a pen. Naomi stared at the screen, arms crossed. We need to reach the others, before they disappear like the rest. Felicia turned to me. Are you ready for this? Really ready? I nodded. We don't stop now. So we didn't. We expanded the network, formally. We secured funding through the Bureau's Victim Recovery Initiative, created safe intake protocols, built an anonymous tip pipeline embedded in financial platforms. And one night, sitting in my living room with a hot mug of mint tea and a blank notepad, I wrote the mission statement. We don't just follow the trail. We light it. 3 weeks later, I found myself in Vancouver, standing in front of a group of women in a small community center. Some were bankers. Some were small business owners. One was a schoolteacher whose ex-fiancé had disappeared with her retirement fund. I told them my story. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with proof. Proof that survival is not the end, it is the beginning. That healing does not come from silence, but from speaking. That they were not alone. Afterward, one woman approached me with tears in her eyes. Her name was Chloe. She was 25. Her story sounded achingly familiar. An investment pitch, a charming advisor, a sudden vanishing act. She had never told anyone before that night. I gave her my card. She handed me a small USB drive. I kept the emails, she whispered. All of them. That was how it started again. Another trail. Another blueprint. Another ghost waiting to be pulled into the light. Because for every Dylan and Zhang, there would be more. But now there was us. And we had the ledger. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the final echoes of a storm that had once consumed my life. The network was no longer a whispered circle. It had become a movement, coordinated, funded, respected. We had our own secure servers, a roster of cyber forensics volunteers, legal advocates, and former victims now trained as advisors. And yet, even with all we had accomplished, there remained one name still lingering in the files like a loose thread. James Foster. He had taken a plea deal for his role in the break-in and digital threats. But after serving a short stint in a minimum security facility, he vanished. Released on a technicality tied to jurisdiction errors. No one had seen him since. No flagged credit cards. No digital footprint. No voice on any wire. It was like he had dissolved into the wind. Until one day in July, when I received a small, unmarked envelope. No return address. No postage stamp. Just one piece of paper inside. Typed in all caps. The blueprint was never just about money. It was a game. And you still think you've won. There was no signature. But I knew. The tone. The message. The threat buried in the pride. It was Foster. Dylan had been methodical. Zhang had been cold. But Foster? Foster was something else entirely. He did not want money. He wanted chaos. I handed the note to Agent Holt, who read it in silence before locking it into evidence. You think he'll come back? I asked. Her answer was slow. Calculated. He's not done. Not with you. That night, I checked my home security systems for the third time. I sat at my desk, opened a new file and labeled it. Foster J. Shadow Operations. Inside, I placed everything I remembered. His patterns. His habits. His voice cadence from the recording we had. His relationship to Dylan. To Zhang. To the dark web of quiet roles he had played. I was not afraid. I was preparing. Because I knew now that survival was not a one-time decision, it was a practice. That night, as I stood by my window, a memory came back to me. The note on my fridge. The one that started everything. Goodbye. I never loved you. Take care. How strange that it had once broken me. And now it meant nothing. I had rebuilt every part of my life, not from that note, but despite it. And in its place, I had written 1,000 new sentences. Words of strategy, of strength, of warning, of purpose. A week later, the FBI asked me to speak at a summit in Washington, D.C. The topic, modern financial deception and the role of survivor intelligence. I stood before a room of people who wore suits and badges, and I told them the truth. The greatest con men do not sell products. They sell illusions. They build trust not to hold it, but to weaponize it. And the moment we stop listening to the survivors, the moment we dismiss gut instinct, emotional hesitation, or what we call overreactions, is the moment they win. I closed the speech with a simple line, one I now live by. The only thing more dangerous than a predator is one who believes no one is hunting him. As I walked off stage, Naomi handed me her phone. A message had just come in to the network's encrypted tip line. A woman in Madrid. Same scheme. Same tactics. Different name. A new ghost. A new game. Asterisk asterisk. But this time, we were already watching. This time, the hunters had the map. This time, the last con had already begun, and it would not be ours.